Madam Clerk, it looks like we've got a quorum. Mr. Prieto, let's go ahead and proceed with item 1.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, members. Item number 1 relates to City Attorney Report and Ordinance relative to amending the municipal code relative to requirements for the municipal separate storm sewer system permit. We have staff from the Bureau of Sanitation and City Attorney's Office.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Shiram Karagani from Los Angeles Sanitation.
Good afternoon, Deputy City Attorney John Carvalho.
Good afternoon, Mike Scudetto with the Bureau of Sanitation.
Very good. Before you all begin, if there's anybody here for items 6 and 7, I would recommend, colleagues, that we take those on consent if there's no objection. Hearing and seeing no objection, we'll take items 6 and 7. Whoever's here, they're free to go. All right. Go ahead.
Very briefly, Councilmember, the item before you, based on the City Council instruction back in 2014 that they asked the Bureau in conjunction with the City Attorney's Office to prepare an ordinance. We have done so. As you know, back in November of 2012, Los Angeles Water Quality Control Board adopted the latest stormwater municipal permit known also as MS4. And with the adoption of the new permit, there are a number of revisions and amendments that need to be made to our existing Los Angeles Municipal Code, which is Chapter 6, Article 4.4, entitled Stormwater and Urban Runoff Pollution Control. The amendments are necessary in order to bring the City Los Angeles Municipal Code in line with the MS4 permit. Very briefly, amendments are as follows: updates to the definition and terms to match those in our permit. Example of that, for instance, it says routine maintenance is clearly defined as work to maintain original line and grade, meaning that we don't have to apply LID to it because this is an O&M function. Another example, updates to the planning and land development program section, also known as the low impact development. We are removing any reference to what we used to call LID SUSUMP, which was the Stormwater Urban Mitigation Plan, so just changing the name. And requiring larger developments to use larger of the two design storms that produce the most stormwater quality design volume. We used to say 3/4 inch, but now the permit required to say 3/4 inch or 85 percentile, whichever is larger. So these are some of the amendments that we make into the ordinance. That concludes my remarks. I would be happy to answer any question.
Very good. I know that we asked for this in September of 2014. It sounds like we've got the adjustments that are necessary. Have we noticed the public on how it is that we're going to raise the fee?
It is going to take place as we go to the City Council, and we have to notice it in the newspapers.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions for staff on item number 1? Mr. Blumenfield?
Well, you mentioned a number of the amendments, and they all sounded fairly perfunctory. Are any of them ones that what would be the most controversial one that you might want to call out?
No controversial. The 85% on that 3/4, we have been doing that for the past 2 years. This is just catching up, and all of our developers are okay. There is a residential fee that when we initiated the program was set at $20, Councilmember, but now that we have 2 years of data, it seems for us to have cost recovery, we have to be spending more time, so it has gone from $20 to $200. But that's based on actual data of what we call plan check. Short of those two, I don't see any, in my opinion, I don't see any other issue.
Right, so definitions, authorizing the updates, the planning development program, all of that.
Correct.
Great, thank
yes.
you.
Very good. Mr. Kretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with our $8 billion MS4 permit compliance issue, at what point will we start charging a stormwater parcel fee? And if we do, what do we think that fee will be per parcel?
Thank you very much, sir. Councilmember, under your direction and Mr. Chair, Mr. Councilmember Fuentes, we are working with CAO and CLA to prepare a report that would address all of these issues. How much would be the fee, for how long, and how we should enact the fee. So I would be reporting back to your committee sometimes in fall when we are completed with the report with CAO and CLA.
And are we looking at ways to deal with that in a cost-effective way, so we're dealing with multiple issues at once, which we have many opportunities to
Absolutely,
do?
Councilman. We are, as you mentioned, that we are looking at that as holistic manner and integrated manner. So it would be one water body, many pollutants together when we implement our program.
And if people have already ripped out their lawns, but they didn't do it in a way that dealt with stormwater issues and the ability to do stormwater capture and cleaning on site, would they still get charged a stormwater fee?
No, of course, we would be working with them to make sure that whoever, is changing their lawns, what they are going to implement is going to be friendly to stormwater from stormwater perspective as far as infiltration. We would work with them also as well, Councilmember.
So are we already doing that? Because obviously we're ripping out lawns as we speak.
Anybody that comes through our public counter through building and safety permit, yes, we are walking them through to make sure what they implement is a stormwater friendly, which basically means infiltration, capture or use, or biofiltration.
So people that are doing this through turf terminators and whatever, do they get picked up in the process?
I don't deal with the turf terminator side of it, but for the residents that are coming and asking for question as a part of LID, we are helping them to implement user-friendly stormwater BMPs.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very
good.
much.
Hearing and seeing no additional comments. Mr. O'Farrell,
Thank
sorry.
you. That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to be sitting here on this committee. Thanks for having me.
Our
Thank
pleasure, Mr. O'Farrell.
Mr. Karagami, just to zero in a little bit more on the residential plan check fee increase from 20 to 200, residential 500 square feet to 2,500 square feet essentially.
Yes.
Does it change if it's for residential larger than 2,500 square feet?
No.
So that's just the set fee,
Correct.
the one-time plan check fee?
That is correct, Councilman.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Colleagues, we don't have any cards from the public on this one, so we'll go ahead and approve it unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 2.
Item number 2, Department of Water and Power and City Attorney reports and ordinance relative to the second amendatory power sales agreement between the department and the Intermountain Power Agency. We have staff from the Department of Water and Power.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Webster. I'm Senior Director of our Power System Engineering and Technical Services Division. And we bring before you today a package of agreements to repower a coal-fired generating station in Utah with clean natural gas. And this will continue the city's leadership to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I want to point out that IPP has been a model for the last 40 years with 36 municipal utilities working together in a project to bring low-cost energy to our ratepayers. And so this project today will continue this municipal collaborative arrangement for the next 50 years. And so what I'd like to do is have Min Lei, who is our Director of our Power System, Fuel and Power Purchase Division, to give you a little bit of background on IPP, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of these agreements.
Good afternoon, committee. Let me just give you a brief background on what IPP is, the Intermountain Power Project, located in Delta, Utah. It's about 120 miles south of Salt Lake. It's a coal-fired station with 2 units, total capacity of 1,800 megawatt. Our firm entitlement share of the plant is 875 megawatt. That's firm for us, and we have access to a total of 1,202 megawatt, subject to certain type of recall. The project also includes the switchyard converter stations, 2 of them, one in Delta and one down here in Adelanto, transmission system that ties IPP down to Adelanto, and an AC system connecting to Gonda in Nevada, and another AC transmission line to Mona. It has a railcar service center with 4 unit trains. It also includes a redundant microwave system connecting the 2 states together. And what's most important here is that it has land and water rights for a generating facility. And one thing to note here is that all of these assets are owned by the Intermountain Power Agency, not owned by us, the department, but IPA. So let me talk a little bit about the impact of our transition. In 2010 and all the way to 2014, our coal consumption is about 40% of our portfolio. With your most recent approval of the Navajo divestiture, in 2015, we'll take that down to 27%. And with this act here, this action would set the stage for us to go into 2025 with 0 percent coal, and that will take us to 40% renewable and 15% efficiency, energy efficiency, as you can see on the screen. Another impact of this action is you can see that with this action here, we'll be taking our greenhouse gas emission down to about 8 million metric tons a year, 2 years ahead of schedule. If you look at the screen, in 1990, we were producing about 18 million metric tons. The Navajo divestiture took us down to about 11, and with this action here, we're down to just about 8 million metric tons. This is a collaborative effort, and it's a model of cooperation of how utilities work together to accomplish big projects. One thing, there are 36 participants in this project. 30 of them are Utah utilities, 6 are California. The department is, of course, one of them. And you've seen this package before. We brought this before in 2013 for you to approve, and we'll bring it back up to you for approval because we make some changes to the renewal process, most importantly is to give the Californian utilities more flexibility with the timing of how they would sign up for their entitlement. So that's just a summary of where we're at, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike for him to continue with the remaining.
So a fundamental question is, why build at IPP? Why is it important? Well, number one is for the last 30 years through our power purchase agreement, we have been paying off those assets. So the transmission that Min has talked about is a very important piece of that. If we were to build that transmission today, it would cost $11.5 billion in today's dollars to do that. Also, in this particular area, we've already signed power purchase agreements for wind energy. So we have about 300 megawatts of wind that's coming down this transmission line. Additionally, what we're planning to do is repower with a much smaller project. And the reason to do that is it opens up the opportunity for much more in the way of renewable energy to come into Southern California. So we can turn IPP into a renewable energy hub if we do this correctly. And we believe that continuing to work with municipal utilities to provide the low-cost power and working together is a sound and fundamental model for us moving forward. So we do have alternatives. This is not our only alternative, but all the other alternatives are challenging. If we were to build new transmission, that is a challenging process with a lot of environmental work. We also have to secure water rights. All of that is available if we do a project here at IPP. So the contracts provide for an early transition. State law requires that we transition IPP by 2027, but we want to move early to achieve those greenhouse gas emissions. But the contract also allows us to even move earlier if all the project participants decide that is in their best interests. And by reducing the plant capacity, we open up the renewable energy. But there's a couple points I want to mention is that provides funds for decommissioning the coal units. So this way, those coal units has the funding to be completely removed from the site. And this is a long-term agreement, so we secure our energy future through 2077. Now, there's a package of agreements. The first one is the second Amendatory Power Sales Agreement. Currently, IPA, Intermountain Power Agency, must offer us a coal option to extend the plant. None of us can participate in a coal option. So we've had to change the agreement, so now they are allowed to offer us a natural gas option. And that's what the second Amendatory does. So, right now, the current proposal is a 1,200 megawatt natural gas-fired plant. Now, it's important because a plant is necessary to secure the operation of the DC transmission line. A DC transmission line cannot just flow 2,400 megawatts without a rotating mass at the northern end. So we have to do something to get the full capacity so we can integrate renewables. That's an important concept, and it's part of the second amendatory.
Can you underscore that? Because I think a lot of people don't understand why it is that you need that inertia to be able to, if we decided to just go completely renewables on that line, would we be able to get the power to Southern California?
Right. So right now the line's rated at 2,400 megawatts, and the reason it can be rated at 24 is you need a rotating mass to basically push the electrons through. Solar energy does not have a rotating mass, so the electrons don't have that push. I'm a mechanical engineer, so I think of it as pressure in a hose. Without the pressure to push the water through the other end, you're not going to get a firm, strong stream. So if you have very light pressure, it's just going to dribble out. So for this, it's really pushing those electrons through, and that's why you need a rotating mass in order to support the DC. And DC is a little bit different. DC systems do require that rotating mass much more so than even AC systems.
And so, but nevertheless, we're dropping down the sort of the dirty, the natural gas from 1,800 kilowatts to 1,200.
To 1,200 megawatts.
And that's enough inertia to move future renewable into the system.
Absolutely. That's enough to fully support the 2,400 megawatt line.
Okay.
The second point I wanted to make on the second amendatory is that it does allow for an alternative project. While it says today 1,200 megawatts of natural gas, as the participants try to think through what do they really need to meet their needs, so we could look at storage technologies, and as California contemplates moving to 50%, storage technologies for DWP may be very important. So we can look at how we integrate that into the project. It also leaves room if we want to do a renewable project on site as part of the core project and allow, again, for additional renewables around that project. Additionally, there's the Renewable Power Sales Agreement. Now what this is actually the agreement that allows the participants to start to sign up. So not all 36 participants may want to participate. We may have a few that decide to drop out of the project, and that's okay. But there's 3 rounds of signups that occur through this Renewable Power Sales Agreement. And so we can sign up for certain quantities, people drop out, we can sign up for additional quantities as we move forward. And that process needs to occur later on this year and through the first part of 2016.
And Mike, is that why you need the delegated authority now?
And that's exactly why we need the delegated authority, is that because of the timing of the project, while it seems like 10 years is a long time, it's actually not. When you have to go through all the engineering studies, the environmental studies, there's a 30-mile gas pipeline, there's a lot of work that we need to do to define it. So what we need is very quickly to define who's in the project and to what level, so we can bring that team together to then commission those engineering studies to meet our own individual integrated resource plans. So that's why we mention it in this slide.
But importantly, and I had trouble understanding this initially, the council still has the ability to weigh in even with the granting of the delegated authority.
And so when we talked about the alternative project, is that any alternative besides the 1,200 megawatts, in the resolution that is before you that the board passes, we have to take that back to the Board of Water and Power Commissioners for approval. And so as we define that alternative project and they approve that, that gives the council the ability to step in and to hear that and take action if need be on that alternative project. There's a couple of other agreements. There's the excess power sales agreement. Some of the participants want to be in the project, but they're not ready to take the energy, so will LA or others take that excess energy. And then there is a technical agreement with Pacific Corp. We've been buying their 4% of energy since the very early years. So this agreement just takes them out, and we just absorb their share, and they're out of the project completely. And so I'm not going to go over this particular schedule. The key point is 10 years for us will go by very quickly because there's a lot of engineering work that needs to occur. And I do want to mention that it's not all just about engineering. We've got to get 36 participants to agree, and that's not an easy process. So it's a very collaborative effort to make sure that we're meeting their needs, and as a group we can move forward. And so lastly is a summary of some of the things that we've already talked about, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you.
So the 36 participants lost LADWP's percentage in that 36 slice pie. What's our percentage?
So our current percentage right now is approximately 48%, and Min, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my memory.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Colleagues, questions? Mr. Blumenfield?
So what happens if some of those 36 participants go south on us? Is there a tipping point? I mean, I know a few we can make up for, but...
So in the agreement, what we have is the ability at the end of 2019, if participants decide they do not want to participate, LADWP will then have the ability to downsize the project if necessary. And we could look at doing something much, much smaller that will still meet the needs of the transmission system and our renewable goals.
There's no, in terms of working with these other folks, there's no downside to that, right? I mean, it just adds...
It's timing. It's just a time, and that's why we need plenty of time to work with them over the next 2 years. All the participants will have nearly all the participants will have an out in 2019, and that's really the final project determination date, because in 2019 at the end we'll have to actually start financing the project and start letting contracts for engineering, detailed engineering and construction, et cetera. So we have about 4 years, 16, 17, 18, and part of 19 to complete the collaborative effort.
And then 2027 comes around, what are our obligations at that point?
Okay, so first we want to repower by 2025, so early. We want to make sure the units are actually operating and fully functional, so that gives us the ability to not take any coal energy. In 2027, those units roll over to the Intermountain Power Agency, but there's lots of discussions as far as can we decommission those units, and the funding is there that would allow that decision to be made in 2027.
Thank you.
You know, I'm realizing that I haven't asked this question. So we're going to drop 600 megawatts of generation, at least initially. This is all base load, and I know that you all have a very complex sort of bunch of buckets that we're generating. Where are we going to get the 600 megawatts of base load? How's that? I mean, I'm sure it's sprinkled throughout the system, but it's a lot of base load. I mean, it's 25% of the city's generation comes out of IPP.
And so in our integrated resource plan, we really spelled out, one, we want to knock off all the energy we possibly can with energy efficiency. So that's where a big amount of energy comes from.
It's first in the loading order.
And then we have the renewables that come next, and we have more and more renewables, and we've talked before, we have quite a bit in the way of solar as well as wind, but the next set of renewables you're going to see is more geothermal. And so that geothermal energy will provide that baseload energy that we're looking for. Couple that with some of the repowerings that we're doing elsewhere, that'll meet our baseload needs. So primarily this plant will function as a renewable integration plant because it will be load following. So that is the concept of the renewable energy hub. And secondly, it'll give us that emergency capacity when it's hot out, but we're not getting all the renewables that we need at that time. It'll provide that peak capacity for the few hours when we really, really need it.
And there's a potential for storage, you say, in the future.
That's right. This particular storage that has the potential is that right underneath the plant is massive salt domes. And so by dissolving the salt, we create these caverns that we could use compressed air by taking energy when we don't need it, compressing that into the ground, and then releasing it later when we need the peak energy. So we have to look at how much integration capacity we need, what cost of that, and then does this really meet our needs and does it fit from a cost perspective. But it's something we'll evaluate. But we also may evaluate other storage technologies, and we may see several types of storage technologies at this facility.
Got it. Mr. Kretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first of all, I want to commend you for your good work, because it's obviously not easy to get 35, 36 odd groups all rowing in the same direction. So I want to congratulate you for that. I'm not sure this is correct or not, so I want to confirm, but what's before us is really just the first step to amend the contract saying that after June 30th, 2025, we won't be generating coal anymore.
So
Is that correct, or are we taking actions that go beyond that at this time?
it's really a two-step process if there's an alternative project. So this allows us to do the engineering studies and to participate in whatever that project is and sign up for it. But if we have an alternative, then we bring that back to the Board of Water and Power Commissioners for approval.
And so what would an alternative look like?
So an alternative, it would be something that might look like a smaller gas-fired generation, smaller than 1,200 megawatts, coupled with compressed air energy storage, with maybe some other renewable storage technologies, as well as there could be a renewable facility right on site itself. So that is the concept, but we have a ways to get there because we have to prove out all of those technologies and cost them out and figure out if that's the right thing for all 36 participants.
Yeah, some of those technologies sound pretty exciting, but I know we're not quite there yet, but I'd certainly encourage us to look at all these interesting renewable technologies. Now, why a 50-year contract? Especially since technology changes quite a bit, might we be locking ourselves into natural gas and find out that 10 years later that there's something much more environmental that we could be doing instead?
So the 50-year is really a 50-year arrangement with the Intermountain Power Agency. That's the most important thing, is we have a power purchase agreement to take whatever energy of whatever project for 50 years, and it secures the transmission line. As a group, we may find that in 20, 25 years, the natural gas plant, it's ready to be retired and replaced with a new technology. But we're now a project participant for that long term, so we can make that call and repower that project in year 25. So we're not locked into this is the only technology, but we are locked into the fact that we have now a footprint for 50 years and the transmission for 50 years.
So we're locking up the transmission and we're locking up presumably whatever the best technology is to use at the appropriate time.
The land, the water rights, and the transmission.
And the power, whatever.
And whatever power that might come out of that site.
And why are we as focused on natural gas as we are? Is it just that some of that needs to drive the project as you described, or is it that we don't have anything better on at the immediate time?
Yeah, there's two primary drivers. The first one is we need dispatchable rotating mass that will secure the full 2,400 megawatt output of the transmission. So that is the core driver. Secondarily, we still need capacity, not 1,800 megawatts worth, but there's still capacity needs when the wind's not blowing and the solar does not have the sunshine to produce. So that capacity is important. But if you look at maybe some of the storage, it'll help mitigate the need for all of that capacity, and that's the driving question that we'll be evaluating over the next couple of years.
So what if storage worked out as well as we hope? Could we possibly store enough to handle that entire load?
That remains to be seen, but from where I sit today, it's highly unlikely you would replace the entire gas-fired plant.
Okay. Thank you.
But the hope is that there's going to be some efficiencies, right? You're going to have a fast-fire plant, presumably, and we're moving away from the base load thinking and more towards a shaping and firming type of project so that you can hopefully use it less, store more often, and move energy when it's the least, from an environmental perspective, costly to all of us. I mean, it's probably not going to fire the same way that an old gas-fired plant, the way we think of it.
And that's why we talked about this is a renewable integration device with the quick start and not necessarily a baseload plant.
Which is a huge shift because this is 25% baseload to the city's portfolio, and we're changing what that looks like.
Correct.
It's really exciting stuff. Mr. O'Farrell, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it is very exciting stuff, and I know you've been reported back several times, so great work on this. It sounds very promising. Actually, Mr. Koretz asked the question that I was going to in terms of the life of the contract. In 2077, we won't all be as young as we are now.
Speak for yourself, Mr. O'Farrell.
Okay, with the exception of the chair, I take that back. So that's a long time. What are we deciding on? Are we deciding on that piece of it today as well? I mean, I think you answered the question very credibly. But what are we deciding on exactly with this item today?
So you are deciding that we can participate with IPA, Intermountain Power Agency, until 2077 in a project of some type.
Are there any opt-out pieces to it? Is it ironclad, so we're locked in for an additional, from 2025, an additional 52 years, or?
Again, the project can change, but we'll have a relationship with IPA that says that whatever project is there, and let's say 48% remain the same level of participation, then we would be committed to 48% of whatever that is for the next 50 years. Now, if the project group decides we don't want a project there anymore, which is highly unlikely, is that we would be 48% of zero. But there will be something there, whether it's storage or renewables or new technology. So we're committing that 48% for that time period.
And we feel that there is enough flexibility to allow for new technologies and...
Absolutely. In LA, fortunately, we will remain as the operating agent, so we can help steer a lot of those conversations. We will remain as the majority participant in this project.
Thank you.
Very good. There are cards as we invite Dr. Pickle up. Do you have an opinion on this PPA, Dr. Pickle?
I do. When this was before the committee in 2013 and before council, there was a motion proposed to evaluate the alternatives every 1 to 2 years. And now that we're into the specifics of considering what those alternatives might be, I think it's important that we report back on an annual or a biennial basis.
Very good.
Because there's just such a huge range of alternatives, and the key decision point is in 2019.
Okay, very good. We do have a couple of cards here. We'll invite, thank you very much, gentlemen, for the presentation. Kent Minalt, Evan Gillespie, and Joe McLaughlin. Yeah. Good afternoon. You have 2 minutes apiece.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Kent Minot. I'm here on the part of the Sierra Clubs Beyond Coal campaign, speaking in support of the motion. And this is a very exciting moment for us because we've worked for a long time to get our city off coal, and it's nice to sit here and participate in some of the hairy engineering details about this, and especially to hear the intent to make IPP be a renewable transmission hub. That's just a great idea, the idea of using compressed air storage to keep that rotating mass. And you know, I'm a non-engineer, so I'm reeling with the mental effort here. But I have a specific question for the deliberations of this committee going forward. One of the great victories of the DWP and the City Council from an environmental justice point of view has been the implementation of a solar plant at the Moapa Paiute Reservation. And this is a community that had been experiencing severe negative effects from a nearby coal plant, and the resulting coal storage, which basically blew toxic dust in their faces all day. And to have them be the beneficiaries of a solar project there seemed like a great victory. And I was wondering, can Moapa be used as a model for further renewable development and pushing the thinking even a little further, specifically along the IPP transmission line? And could the model be adapted for other Native American tribes? Could it also be adapted for people who are not necessarily Native American? How about counties and municipalities that might lie nearby that transmission line? The environmental justice aspect of this model makes it unnatural for us advocates when we want to support things like this. For example, it also bears some resemblance to the community solar model that we hear people starting to think about right here in town. Anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Great. Hi, Evan Gillespie. I'll be very quick. We support the proposal and appreciate your time today. Just a couple quick points I want to make. You know, the coal industry is rapidly undergoing a lot of change right now, and the utility industry as well. Since the start of 2010, a coal plant is announced for retirement every 10 days. So the industry is changing, and I think it's a credit to the Department of Water and Power that they've spent the last 6 years thinking about this and have really been methodical and thoughtful about community engagement, about engaging the right stakeholders to really think through to make sure we have the best possible solution here. And I thought the discussion today was absolutely the right one about how to balance cost, environment, grid management, rotating mass. Those are all really critical questions. We're very interested in understanding the alternatives going forward. We want to make sure that we're not in the same place 10, 15 years from now where we're looking up going, gosh, we've got this big fossil fuel plant, and what do we do about it because the world is changing again. We've got tighter carbon limits. We think this is the right conversation to have going forward. And I just lastly want to say that the department has been excellent to work with on this. The staff there have been amazing. They've been transparent and clear about what their goals are. When we have disagreed with it, they have heard that disagreement. They have worked with us. We don't fully support everything that was talked about today, but the team there has been you've all heard the 36 participants who all have a slightly different view on this, and the collaboration. It really is a model for how other utilities are going to get off of coal and transition to renewable energy. And so we just want to take today to thank the staff and thank you all for hearing us, and appreciate your time.
Yes, Joe McLaughlin, also with the Sierra Club. I'm a ratepayer, which makes me somewhat of an owner of this, and I'm really gratified to see that this program sets a path into the future, which I think is the way that we need to go. One of the concerns I had before was that we would be locking ourselves into a natural gas infrastructure that would then continue to pollute the atmosphere. But as I understand now, we have mechanisms to reduce that and become an alternative energy hub, which I think is a very good idea. So my concern and my comment is just to continue pushing for renewables as fast as we can and as locally as we can. I mean, this is a great thing to have that transmission line, but let's also work for rooftop solar distributed generation within the city of Los Angeles, because that could be a benefit for all of us as well. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you all very much. There are no additional cards on the item, so the motion to approve the request for authority to the Department of Water and Power to execute the second amendatory power sales agreement between the department and IPA, allowing for continued and modified participation in the IPP, as well as terminate the existing agreement with PacifiCorp on the purchase of power and to assume its generation share, and assume delegated authority to enter the renewal contracts to continue participating in IPP through June 15th, 2077 upon IPA making of a renewal offer. Mr. Vice, can I have a second?
Second.
Very good. There's no objection. That will be adopted unanimously. Item number 3, Mr. Prieto.
Item number 3, Office of Public Accountability Ratepayer Advocate Report in response to motion Fuentes O'Farrell relative to the Department of Water and Power's new customer information system and the challenges associated with its launch.
Great. We'll have the Ratepayer Advocate and the department come up. Mr. Wright, Mr. Pickle, Ms. Collins.
I'm Fred Pickle, Executive Director of the Office of Public Accountability, Ratepayer Advocate, and our report today responds to a motion by Councilman Fuentes and O'Farrell on billing challenges that DWP has faced with the implementation of their system. This is intended as a constructive approach, given the further investment required in further stabilizing DWP's customer information system, but also in the need for replacement and updates to other key DWP systems. Most of the recommendations are in intermediate and long-term and are not intended to constitute preconditions for any rate review. Also, the department seems to have been making very fast work of any of the shorter-term recommendations. This report was released on July 1, 2015, and is available on the OPA website. Key aspects are the state audit, chief sources of delay, our key recommendations, especially relating to restoring DWP's agility and stabilizing management, and then dividing the tasks to accomplish these recommendations and our next steps. What we had to say about the state audit was fairly succinct. The city has a lawsuit pending with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and that is addressing failures of PricewaterhouseCoopers in the implementation of this project. But as we look at the costs of DWP to do this to date, we believe those costs are reasonable. In terms of chief sources of delay, the problems DWP had in responding to the implementation of the customer information system, or first, they had challenges in procuring outside help and in hiring personnel to fill in during the high call volumes in particular. There was, secondly, a problem with the Joint Services or Administrative Services Division being in a secondary role with regard to the operating divisions of water and power, where they needed to be in a position to lead. And we think it's important that they be in a position to establish long-term plans and budgets for IT infrastructure and have the control needed to execute. And there'll be more on that later. Third, the need for agility cannot be eliminated by a quest for perfect planning. These projects are always accompanied by surprises. DWP's high turnover in executive management and high retirement rates and churn in position means the situation will not likely self-correct. An attempt to find the guilty and fire them is not likely to be successful. That seems to have been the pattern over the last 15 to 20 years, and it hasn't yielded good results. What are our key recommendations? For the joint division, as a part of the benchmarking efforts, establish a joint services division in the management structure with adequate span of control over its responsibilities. In many cases, they have too many people reporting to senior managers in ways that it's difficult to manage. Second, within the next year, they should strengthen the program management office within the Joint Services Division, and the PMO or the IT program management office needs directive authority and control. That means the ability to stop work if things are in trouble and to highlight the issues. Second, it needs to have a delegation framework so that the PMO addresses not only budget and schedule, but also operating risks and labor limitations. And finally, there needs to be an advisory body of users. That's not a group that votes on whether to go ahead or not. It's advisory. That authority relies with the program management office. And if there are disagreements on that, there should be an appellate group of the three AGMs, Joint Water and Power, and with ultimate authority lying with the GM, but also a dotted line from the PMO to the Board Audit Committee. Next, one of the challenges in getting outside resources has been a lack of transparency in the shared management labor responsibility to agree on contracting procedures. Over 90% of the time that works well, but occasionally it hangs up and stalls things for long periods of time. The fourth area is within the next 3 months, at the time we issued this report, we wanted a contract for a backup call center signed, which would allow triggering for use on certain objective parameters and increasing permanent staffing when use grows beyond the backup ability. Yesterday, the DWP board approved such a contract combined with a public a letter of agreement between the union and DWP. So that is a key goal that we believe is very important. It's been accomplished by DWP. And then after experience is gained with managing this overflow call center to a wait time standard, permanent staffing at 2 distinct call centers can be planned and proceed. So we hope to learn with the backup call center and then move ahead on a more permanent basis in the long term. And then finally, there's the problem of hiring and contracting, which we think will take longer to solve in detail, but within the existing governance, we should find ways to allow DWP to hire as well as contract within 30 days under dire and urgent circumstances. We specifically invented the phrase dire and urgent because the city has the ability to set emergency circumstances, but if there is a specific disruption of customer service because of a whole range of business reasons, that would constitute dire and urgent under our definition. And in the long term, or in the intermediate term, we need to find ways to allow DWP to hire within 6 months and procure within 3 months. The report has 23 detailed recommendations with suggestions on the combinations of actions by the DWP board, the mayor, and the city council. While a few of these recommendations have a short horizon, most are likely to require an extended focus. If the goals, however, for timing for hiring and procurement cannot be achieved on a reasonable time frame, OPA recommends more fundamental comprehensive changes in the governance and authority over hiring and contracting for DWP.
So there's well, let's have DWP respond, but I know that there was a recent action that I was just informed of. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Pickles, do you have a little bit more?
I can't get away with it. Oh. The key question is, how should the DWP board, the mayor, and the council process and sustain focus on these recommendations? A lot of them start with the DWP board, but this will require extended focus because some of the changes required for hiring and procurement may require charter amendments or more than one or a series of ordinances.
Thank you. We very much appreciate the report of Dr. Pickle and all of the recommendations. We are taking each one individually and determining the process that would need to be undertaken to implement those changes. As Dr. Pickle said, many of them are long-term, medium to long-term, so that we're looking at that process for implementation and how we'd go about that. But we very much appreciate the report.
It's sort of hard to know where to begin because it's dawning on me, I'm sure as it is on many of us, that the outset of this problem was 2 years ago, thereabouts today. It was at the end of July, beginning of August, and we found ourselves in this situation. And as much as I think that there's a lot of deep diving that we've got to do in terms of the recommendations, I want to begin focusing a little bit on the recommendations that speak to how it is that we address problems like this. Because if it's not this situation, it's bound to be something else with the utility, and our ability to rapidly respond to our customer, I think, is really important. And Dr. Pickle, you've got a couple of key recommendations here, but I want to say that the board recently made a decision to contract out. They haven't completely decided how those protocols are going to be. Can you inform us what it is that the board is doing, and maybe that'll inform some of the conversation here?
So a supplemental call center contract was approved yesterday, and what that consists of is a remotely located call center outside of this service area. And in the event of a major disaster or emergency, phone calls could be transferred there. That phone center can process those phone calls, notify wherever we need to notify within the organization. It might be the emergency control center. It could be dispatch about outages. But if something happened to our call center and it went down, we now have the ability for phone calls to be routed outside the area, answered, and the process continues so that customers could continue to call us.
Do we have that ability today, or we just have the protocols to be able to contract out the supplemental call center?
We have to now, based on the approval of the contract, train representatives with this third party so they know how to handle the phone calls. But that'll be a short-term process. We can start that now and move forward, and it'll be just 30, 60 days, kind of a short time period before we get down there. They're trained and they're ready to be called if and when we would ever need them.
So it begs the question, so if we can be up in 60 days, why weren't we able to do this a year and a half ago when we were having the problems? I mean, what's different between the decision that the board made recently and when we had this tremendous need with documented 2-hour plus queues on the phones? I mean, what happened between now and then?
Between now and then, we negotiated with the vendor, with the provider, with labor, and got to a joint agreement on how we could move forward. And part of the other process is we were hiring staff internally at the department at that time because we were significantly understaffed. So the primary goal at that point was get staff online and train our own staff, get the phone calls down to a reasonable level so now that we can train additional third-party staff to come in and handle those calls as well.
So that's an important detail. Now, a supplemental call center is not the same as a redundant. I mean, it's there for emergencies. So when I think of our dispatch for police and fire, we have identical buildings, one here, not too far away from this building, and one in the West Valley. Do we have a second call center or plans for developing a second call center to have a redundant system so it's not crisis call center, but a redundant system?
Yeah, yes, we do. We just signed a few weeks ago a lease in Chatsworth, and we will go ahead and we're looking at how to get about 100 reps moved up to that location. So again, if something happened to our downtown location, we would have the redundancy at that location to handle the phone calls. Vice versa, if something happened there, we'd have the downtown location. So there'll be 2 locations in town with call centers and 1 remote location in the event of something happened to both those call centers.
So the irrespective of, well, rather, if we don't have any sort of immediate crisis or challenge, this new sort of call center scheme that you all have will help make the experience even better now. I mean, presumably with 2 call centers, we're going to have even less wait times. Never mind, I don't think that you have 2-hour plus these days. It's only probably a matter of minutes. If Mr. LaBonge were here, he'd go and find out for us. But this is all, I imagine, in response to what's happened, but also in what we've heard recently about trying to really improve the customer service experience for our ratepayers. Is that right?
Exactly. We want to make sure customers can get through to us and that customers can get responses in a timely manner. The supplemental call center as well, if something happens and our wait times become excessive, we can, at the 2 local call centers, we'll have a 3rd call center that can jump in and handle them during regular operations.
Got it. And 2 years ago, we only had 1.
We only had 1.
Got it.
And wait times were less than 2 minutes on average last week, so I'm very excited.
They better be. We've got 3 call centers now. We only had 1 before. So another thing that sort of still confuses me a little bit in terms of sort of how it is that we fix it. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we still have some challenges in hiring staff. We had a joint committee hearing in the midst of this chaos that was part of the CIS rollout with Mr. Krikorian's committee, and we had challenges with the personnel department, it seemed to me, to be able to move expeditiously to get the needed resources. Never mind contracting out for emergency or crisis response, but just the sad truth of the fact that we can't hire folks fast enough, even when the rate base is paying for it. what is sort of the latest, greatest? It sounds like you're going to ramp up the hiring for the second call center. Is there now a lot of clarity in that process, more so than there was 2 years ago when all of this was sort of shaken out?
There is. We've worked with the personnel department, and we now have an ongoing process where we have essentially lists that are certified on a continuing basis. And in fact, about every 2 months for the last 8 months, we've been hiring a new batch, training them, bringing them on the phone. So we've got another 60 to 80 planned to be hired of customer service reps and field service reps plan to come on board in September. So the personnel department has really worked well to ensure that we have an ongoing supply of qualified candidates that we can select from.
Now, this will probably get me in trouble, but it's my sense that the rate base is paying for people in the personnel department to fill and satisfy the needs, whether it's CSRs or whatever it is, but it doesn't seem like 100% of their time is currently used that way. We split time with the city, split time with the city general fund, some with the rate base. Has there been any structural changes to say that this is a personnel department person that is 100% dedicated to the needs of the utility? Because I think if we did that, then we would be able to move, certainly in this past experience, faster, but going forward in a way that hopefully addresses some of the cliff that's ahead of us here with the department. A third of the department is eligible for attrition in the coming years. I mean, that's part of the reason that you all put a human resources capital line in your IRP this year. Do we have that dedication from the personnel department?
That's actually one of the recommendations from the ratepayer advocate, and I'll let
Well,
him
I
go
know
ahead.
it is. I'm just wondering if it seems like we have the ability to ramp up, CSRs quickly now. I'm wondering internally if the personnel department has said, if it's being paid for by DWP, we will now absolutely, Felipe, the personnel department person, is not going to touch anything but DWP work so we can help DWP move faster, quicker, smarter.
I'm not aware of the detailed answer to that question, but it's something we do need to look at.
Our general manager's coming up either to tell me to calm down or to say, yes, that's what we need. Dr. Pickle, do you have an opinion of this? Because I know it's a recommendation, because I think if we streamlined, I mean, those dollars presumably are intended to facilitate the utility's work, not 20% of the utility or 20% of that person's time to be spent on DWP. I mean, I think that's part of the problem that we've got here.
We requested that the DWP board ask the CAO and the personnel department to document that spending. But we really don't need more analysis as such. We need progress.
Ms. Edwards?
Thank you, sir. Marcy Edwards, DWP. Initially, at the beginning of the crisis, we're coming out of the recession, and there had been a citywide hiring freeze, and personnel had lost a significant number of people as well. When I first started, there was 186 exams in the queue citywide. There was a lot of work that needed to be done. Personnel did a yeoman's job, but was not able to regain staffing until this last budget. They've added people. And what that has then done is allowed them to not utilize the DWP paid for staff in the same way that they were previously. And we're in discussions with the GM of personnel on defining service level agreements that they will keep so that we can then monitor and ensure those resources are being used specifically for DWP exams.
But they're cashing your check, right?
Oh, you bet.
Yeah, okay. All right. Colleagues, do you have any questions for the ratepayer advocate, Mr. Blumenfield?
The attrition issue, just to start, concerns me, and you were raising it, and I know we weren't even keeping up with attrition for the CSRs. Do we have a plan for at least meeting the attrition rate?
Yes, we do. In fact, we're beyond the attrition rate right now, creating enough staff to handle all the issues that are kind of winding down from the conversion. But with attrition, we can level that out to the required level in a very fast time, like within a year, we can get back to levels that would meet the standard and normal expected wait times and processing.
And also, because part of our job here is to stir up trouble. Question for you is, are any of the recommendations non-starters? Or like, when you look through these, is there any piece of it that you just say, not going to go there?
We're still in the analysis phase. I don't know if Marcy has something else.
Let me make an easier question then. Out of all the recommendations, which one will be the most challenging to implement and why?
I frankly think the ones that are going to be the most difficult surround expedited contracting out and expedited hiring. They involve a lot of rules that extend outside of the Department of Water and Power. Obviously, the easier lifts are those that are within the control of the board alone. The organizational development, while challenging, is within the purview of the board. Development of the project management offices, those are all things that we can do. The difficult ones, the matrix we're developing, we're actually starting with, as Dave mentioned, here's all the things you would need to change to be able to accomplish that. We have not yet spoken to the RPA in detail about this ability to declare dire and urgent circumstance, somehow allowing for some different methodologies to be used, and we do want to explore that with them and see if there is some real there to be able to help us. But those are probably the two heaviest ones.
Those are the heaviest. Is there any aspect of this that, putting aside the difficulty that in terms of just a policy agreement perspective, that disagreeing with the direction that the recommendations are going, or are we all sort of saying these are good recommendations, it's just practically difficulty, these are going to be tough to do, or is there a policy issue that we should be aware of that there's a disagreement on?
The advantage that the RPA had, and excuse me for answering for you, buddy, but he had a front row seat the entire time.
Right.
And so it enabled them to make their recommendations, I think, well analyzed and extremely thoughtful. Where there might be disagreements, they're more implementation related. Like in some of the organizational issues, I don't think organizational adjustments will fix it as much as greater leadership and culture change. Those are the things that really are the underpinnings of some of those. So I don't think there's anything in there we have vehement disagreement on. I think it's just more a matter of prioritization and if that would actually fix the problem.
And we agree on the challenges of leadership and culture change. And we think attrition is a component of it, going so far as to suggest that some of the senior management should have multi-year, 5-year contracts as part of their employment, because it means other components of the organization can't wait out. Leadership change that's been going on at a mean time between GMs of 18 months.
Yeah.
The other component is the huge number of employees eligible for retirement in the next few years.
There's one more contributing factor, and then I'll let this one go. The civil service system is structured to where people consistently want to improve their own circumstance by moving around. As management, we have no way of constraining or limiting people's ability to want to better their own circumstance. But what it means is it's not just the leadership at the top. The leadership throughout the organization is moving around constantly. You'll get someone trained in something, and then they'll want a higher level position, and they'll move into a place that they don't have nearly the background. It'll take them 2 more years to get good. So managing that is a challenge, and doing it in a way that's still consistent with people being able to take advantage of opportunities to better themselves. But the numbers on the amount of internal movement are staggering. So we're always faced with this constant training problem.
And the tools for that, and you mentioned some long-term contracts, what are the other tools that you need or to fix that?
The long-term contracts works at the top where you have exempt positions. The issue that I bring up is lower than that and is a result of the civil service system. And that is one that would, again, take some changes that are outside the purview of the board and DWP management.
It really comes down to the culture change, because without a standard operating procedure, a way that DWP works through projects that cross laterally across the firm, then when people change positions, it's very impactful. So I think if they had more successes in managing a stronger PMO function and having standard protocol, then when the people change out, it's not quite so destructive to the project schedule. but it's still going to take culture change and adjustment for people to have a shared expectation of how that project management office functions.
It also is very, very much impacted by the speed of technological obsolescence. We can build water pipeline, we can build aqueducts, we can build generators, we can build renewable projects. Specifically, information technology is very challenging. It's why we brought outside experts and integrators, and we still have had serious difficulties. And you can see this in a lot of other companies. It's just visible for us, I think, more because we live in more of a microscope circumstance.
You know, I just wonder, Dr. Pickle, from your recommendations, I mean, I know that you were responding to the response that the department had as a result of the CIS failure, but has it ever been contemplated to give and the department should answer this too, give the department their own personnel department within itself? I mean, today, for example, with tree trimming, the city of Los Angeles used to have its tree trimmers. The department has theirs. Understanding that you've got this big human asset issue that's literally, I mean, pretty frightening, because God forbid that there's a future MOU and folks realize it's time to leave the utility because I get more now than later. We'll find ourselves here again with fighting with the personnel department. I shouldn't say fighting. Dependent upon the personnel department to be able to satisfy quickly the attrition issues that are happening at the department. Why not have its own internal personnel division and have it report to the board?
That was really the fundamental component of my closing remarks. If these basic changes we outlined don't work, we should consider moving personnel authority, potentially writing a different set of civil service rules for DWP alone, a different set of procurement rules for DWP alone, to focus and help expedite process.
Would that necessitate a change to the charter? I can't imagine that it would.
This is one of those, it depends who you ask questions.
All right, I'll ask somebody who'll give me the answer I want. Very good. Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, I think the bigger issue is the personnel department itself, and we found out in the budget, for instance, that I think there are 35 backed up exams that normally would take a month or so to go through, and instead they're taking about 9 months. And the mayor's budget originally didn't include much catch-up money for that. So we added some, but it's still going to take a couple of years to get to the point where everything's where it should be. Probably every department would like to have their own personnel department so they could get things done more quickly, but I think the broader, more direct answer is we need to fully staff up the personnel department, get it caught up quickly on all the areas that it's backed up, and make it functional, because I think it's one of the huge bottlenecks in the whole city functionality area. And that's not even taking into account what was already discussed, which is true in DWP and a number of other places, which is we're an aging workforce, and we're going to find in the next few years suddenly we have to replace a whole lot of people, and we're barely functioning at an unacceptable level for dealing with the people we have when we're not doing a lot of hiring. What happens when we hit heavy retirements? I think it's got to be a focus for the whole council on getting this department really up to speed, getting it fully staffed up, clearing up all the backups, and then I think this will be less of a problem for DWP and everywhere else. Because right now, DWP can pay for its portion of what it needs. It doesn't necessarily mean that personnel can do it anyway. No matter what you pay for it, whether you're paying for it or the general fund is paying for everyone else, we're way behind the 8 ball. So everybody gets an appropriate piece. Now, obviously, we should have some ability in emergencies to hire more quickly, and I don't think we do. And the fact that we have a struggle to hire in 6 months under normal circumstances is also rather unfortunate. Hopefully we'll get to the point where that isn't the case for any of our departments.
Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you came up with the term dire and urgent. I would recommend, let's call it dire, urgent, and biblical. Maybe that'll get more attention.
Epic, we could say epic.
Biblical?
too. Yeah.
Epic. No, a question in terms of attrition over the next 3 years, roughly, rough numbers that actually affect call center combined with the batches that you're bringing aboard in between 60 and 80 or whatever. What numbers of people are we looking at in the next 3 years, total numbers? We're talking hundreds and hundreds of hires.
Yes.
Correct? Hundreds and hundreds and
Correct.
hundreds. Maybe even more than hundreds.
Yeah, we're staffing to a level of about 1,500 people, so that there tends to be a couple hundred a year that leave through attrition.
Okay.
So yes, hundreds and hundreds will be hired.
And Angelinos in every neighborhood need jobs. Are they hearing about these job opportunities adequately, and can we help with that?
Yeah, ask anybody that you know to go to the website and look at the customer
I would
service
love to put something on
representative.
my website and put it out on social media and help some of my constituents find jobs.
We'll get that link to you.
Terrific. In terms of part of the report, I know that there are differences in terms of between labor and management as far as the probationary period, and that kind of fits into the mix and is, can you elaborate on how that affects things? And is there a set probationary period right now? Anyone can take a stab at that.
I'm not conversant on what that particular issue is, sir. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I think they're currently working on trying to figure out how to best train people, given the turnover, and give them the time they need to get trained, not prematurely fire them, but then not be stuck with people who can't possibly be trained to do the job. And they're working with the limitations of their current agreements and under the pressure of all this hiring and turnover, and just trying to figure out how to adjust things.
But we're satisfied that the sense of urgency is sufficient enough that people are in a sort of can-do mode as opposed to, the opposite.
Well, the intake is up now, so there's enough new people coming that it's not as critical.
Okay, so we're pretty comfortable
Yeah.
in that sense?
Yes, we're working and looking at that, but by and large, we're training our staff, and they're doing a great job, and we're retaining them. Those that can't do are very small and few and far between.
Terrific. And you mentioned that the average call time now or the wait time is a little less than 2 minutes as of last week.
Correct.
And so is it correct that about 80% of the time it's about 60 seconds, and then I saw that somewhere?
Our goal is to answer 80% of the calls within 30 seconds. We aren't there yet, but we're getting a lot closer than we were. And again, the average wait time last week was 2 minutes. Could be 3. The goal is we're trying to get it 3 minutes or less.
Terrific. And you're monitoring that weekly or monthly?
We monitor that like on a continuing, ongoing basis.
You're monitoring it right now?
One of these screens, literally, that you look at the entire time. Say, what's the call wait, what's the volume, what's the wait time?
Terrific. Thank you.
Very good. Hearing and seeing no additional comments, colleagues, and there are no cards on this item, let's go ahead and note and file the ratepayers report and request that the department report back with information on the backup customer call center. I was going to say options, but you all are moving quickly, which is refreshing. Also to report back on the DWP personnel department and other departments as necessary to evaluate civil service classifications identified by the Board of Water and Power Commissioners to be designated as critical to ensure that candidate lists are maintained with viable candidates. I don't think we need to do this one anymore. Having the department and personnel to report on the feasibility of establishing a set of protocols that facilitates expedited hiring when urgent services arise, because it sounds like in the process. So if you can give us a report back on that critical call center. Also to have the personnel department report on how funds it receives from the department are spent to support hiring for the Department of Water and Power, and to have the Department of Water and Power report back in 6 months on the status of recommendations from the ratepayer advocate, and report if the Board of Water Commissioners have adopted the same. All right? Very good. That will be the order if there's no objection.
No objection.
Doesn't look like it. Item number 4, Mr. Prieto.
Item number 4, motion Fuentes Bloomfield relative to Department of Water and Power reporting to the council regarding the status of the accounts receivables balance and strategies for reducing the balance as well. You have staff from the Department of Water and Power.
Mr. Wright?
Thank you. We've reported a couple times on the efforts to reduce our accounts receivable. We're here with another update. As you know, we bill about $5.6 billion per year for all city services. As of July 26, active accounts receivable over 60 days has gone down to 4% of annual billings. The goal is to get to 2.7%. But since January, accounts receivable over 60 days has gone down by $135 million. The increased focus on collections is really working. And we have a collection thresholds. And let me explain that. If you're a commercial account and you owe us more than $250 and you haven't paid within 19 days, we start the notification process, which is a late notification and several other things. They have you paid your bill. Residential threshold, we're now at $250. But if it's due more than 60 days, we start that process. The really great kind of statistic right there is that was $1,000 in 60 days less than 6 months ago, which means we're able to contact customers and let them know we need you to pay your bill, and pay it as quickly as you can.
Before you move on from that slide, which is the tranche that is the hardest to get? Because to me, intuitively, having collected $135 million in the category of AR that's over 60 days, seems to me that's the harder tranche to get. Is that correct?
It is. The older it is, the harder it is to obtain, which is why we slowly want to bring that 60 days for $250. Every month we look at it, and we bring it in, another 15 days. So that'll go to 45 days, and in anywhere between 2 and 3 weeks. We monitor that with call volume. We'll bring it into 30 days. We'll bring it into 19 days, and we do that over
So when it says total there, the $605 million, that's still AR that's outstanding?
That's the entire AR that is outstanding from what was billed yesterday to what might have been billed 4 months ago.
Right, and so the 135 reduction was in that 0 to 60-day range. I'm sorry, the 61 to over 90 days range.
Correct.
And so it's now 13, 1, 4, it's $243 million thereabouts now, and you've collected $135 million.
Correct.
So did you reduce that tranche by about a third?
Yes, we did.
That's really impressive. I mean, I only because that's the hardest tranche to get your money from. Am I interpreting this correctly?
You're absolutely right, and it requires individual attention and individual account efforts, and that's what these additional customer service representatives are working on, is contacts with customers to collect on the accounts, as well as all of the other items that they might be dealing with new accounts and issues on your bill. So we've been spending a great deal of time on the older accounts to collect them and set up payment arrangements, which is actually the next slide on how we do that, which is most customers that owe more than 60 days pay through arrangements, which means you set up a payment plan. Right now, we have about 59,000 people on those payment plans, which is a little less than 4%. But it shows they work when you see that 24,000 customers paid their plans off successfully over the last 3 months. So we set up workable plans, and in fact, if a customer calls and says, I'm having a problem meeting these arrangements, we'll work with them to set up payment arrangements that can work so that they can maintain service. The results there is kind of getting back at what you were saying, Councilman Fuentes, which is those oldest accounts are the hardest to collect, but the accounts receivable for active accounts over 90 days, so the oldest have dropped by about 40% from $300 million in January down to $184 million. And our goal is to get to $150 million over 60 days by March 2016, because we have to work down to that. And just an aside, there's always going to be some older accounts, and in fact, the federal government, it takes them 3 months to pay. It doesn't matter what you do, it takes them 3 months to pay. So they're in that group, and we're always going to have a certain amount. but that is only 2.7% of our billings, and that is equivalent to kind of the benchmarks that other utilities have as well. So,
In all of this universe of AR related to the CIS sort of fiasco, because this is a norm. There's always money out there.
correct.
And then we had the CIS deal, and we attributed a big chunk, back of the envelope, about $300 million or so, to that episode. Have we charged off or written off as completely uncollectible any of that amount yet?
We look at the write-offs, and I'm going to get to an item on the write-offs
Okay. All right,
just
I'm
a little
sorry.
farther. No problem at all. This shows, though, as you talk, the increase in the accounts receivable due to the conversion, and you can see it kept going up till January where it peaked, and there is the work down efforts, the actuals through July of 2015, then you can see the planned from August to March when we will should hit that 150 million over 60 days as our benchmark. And again, we work it down every month. You will see it level off kind of in the November-December timeframe. There's fewer days during those months, so those numbers don't go down quite as much during that season, and then they go ahead and start reducing again as.
When did the CIS problem start? In what month?
CIS started in September of 2013, August, September 2013. And then you started noticing the problems with accounts receivable like 2, 3, 4 months after that as bills weren't going out and people weren't paying, and then it just started escalating up. So there's one other area, and we've talked a little about this before, inactive accounts. An inactive account is where you've closed your account, you've left the LADWP service area and moved somewhere else. We send a bill to your forwarding address, but sometimes that bill might not be forwarded, or other times you don't leave a forwarding address. We would usually start a collections process in that. This was kind of towards the two reasons. This was one of the lower priorities as we're trying to just work through collections, and there's a system issue which made this harder to collect. So that amount is essentially peaking now. We're working that every day, going back and trying to find those customers that have left our system and still owe us money, giving them kind of a first letter to, hey, you need to pay your bill if we can find that person. And then we'll send those to collection agencies, and we'll do that after this fix is implemented on the system in about, again, 30 to 60 days. But that represents an accumulation, and once we get through that process, our goal will be $50 million, aged usually between about 4 to 6 months when we completely turn them over to collection. As a piece of information, because it's like, why would somebody pay? We, at this point, if you haven't paid in a year or so, we go after your credit. It'll hit your credit score. So that's kind of what your offer is. Pay this or you're going to have your credit decline. And that'll motivate a lot of people to go ahead and pay. But if you look at those numbers, I'll come back to that in just a second. These are where we're going. We really want to keep our key performance indicators at acceptable levels, fix all the critical defects, and work through the system, get this system working how it was meant to be, and do that as quickly as possible. This was the write-off item. So if we looked at those inactive accounts and the collections on that, it's still too early to determine what they actually will be, but if we looked at not collecting anywhere between 50 and 90% of those inactive accounts, if you go to the bottom, it would impact customers by about 10 to 20 cents a month. That would be the write-off impact. So while it's a substantial amount of dollars that might not be collected, it hit customer bills by about 10 to 20 cents a month. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have and let you know we'll be back in a couple of months and give you another update on how things are going.
Okay, so the extraordinary write-off, 60 million to 110, that is above and beyond what you normally, that's directly attributable to the CIS?
To CIS issue.
So presumably that's related to the lawsuit as well, and that those are numbers that are
correct.
Delve too much into that, but that's all linked. And on the arrears, I was just it was interesting, we're down below the goal where we were in July of 14, we're now well below that. And that's where the problem started. Like if you went back another year, would you have gone down to that level?
It was about $150 million before we converted. We were at about that level. I don't know the exact amount, but we're back to about where we were at in March of 2016 before conversion.
And that roughly corresponds, like looking at on page 2, the 311, the different categories. I mean, it'd be useful to see what that looks like 2014, 2013, 2012, to just get a baseline sense of it. But I can kind of intuit it based on your goal and your flatline goal. But
sure.
Was there anything, if you went back like that, would there be a radical difference in any of these categories?
In these categories, if we went back before go live, the 0 to 30, 31 to 60, they'd be about where they are right now. It's the 60 and over that would have been lower.
Okay. And then a question kind of related to this, but I'm working on a motion about combining the information that customers provide for universal lifeline services for the phone company with the DWP stuff. Do you think there's any issue there in terms of consolidating that information under one umbrella? Would that be a saver of making it less labor intensive for customers at least?
We have a strong policy about confidentiality of customer records, so the sharing of customer records with another utility would only be allowed to be done with a customer approval. We'd have to proactively find that approval. We have what's a pretty efficient qualification process if you need assistance, that you can call up our phone center, talk to a rep, walk through that. They'll give you all the help on how to do that. Then you'll qualify for some various programs that you can utilize. There's federal programs like LIHEAP, Home Energy Assistance Program, and some of those are more specific to the utility, gas and electric power sort of thing.
Looking at ways to consolidate, and I guess when I look at the confidentiality thing, I think of it as the city family as opposed to just DWP or Universal Lifeline or those kinds of, government confidentiality versus government private. But I guess that we can look into that further down the way, but it just reminded me because of this. Thank you.
Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What was the cost to get us back to the realm of where we wanted to be? What do we have to pay internally for extra staff, and what do we have to pay for collection agencies that we wouldn't normally have paid?
We're compiling those numbers. They're not completely done in that there's a where we should have been when we went live, which was higher, and still kind of analyzing what those numbers would have been if we'd have been adequately and appropriately staffed when we went live, but because we were significantly understaffed when it was converted. So that's like on the kind of on my analysis list. Right now the focus is on hiring and getting us moving forward. So I will be getting that number together.
Okay, and do we know what the total dollars would be of money left for us to collect, both what we're actively pursuing and what we're looking at possibly writing off?
They're the two numbers up there, those bar charts up there, the active accounts, the inactive accounts, and then the range.
Well, they list active accounts, but they don't list active accounts attributable purely to our system screw-up, as opposed to other normal active accounts.
Okay, no, I don't have that number, no.
Do we have a way to pursue that, and are we looking
yes, we are. We're looking at getting that information gathered, yes.
And what percentage of the money that we save by dropping receivables do we typically expend? Because the question for me is, should we go further than we might have than just getting back to normal, but continue to put more money into collections and try to drop it far below our normal? Or do we know where the diminishing returns are in this process?
We We're looking at what the industry norms are and the benchmarks and what other utilities do. I will tell you my past experience is that the lower you can have a customer fall behind, meaning if you can take those amounts down to a lower level, the easier it is actually for that customer to work their way out of that back bill. So we will be, after we get to the $250 in 19 days, we'll start analyzing maybe residential customers we should go to $100, because again, if we're notifying let's work together because you owe us $100, that's a lot easier for customers to pay than let's work together, you owe us $250. And again, in my past experience, found that customers were actually happier if you started the collection efforts at lower levels than let them get farther behind in their bill.
I totally agree with you. I haven't done it for a million years, but one of my first jobs out of college included, among other things, collections, although it was business to business. But yes, the deeper they are, the harder it is to get them to collect, and the more hopeless it looks, and they may just say, well, come and get me, as opposed to, okay, I can handle this and work with me to figure it out. So I think to the extent we can find the earliest opportunity to jump in, I think that's a great approach.
Very good. We'll go ahead and request that you come on back in 90 days.
Okay,
Thank you. Item number 5.
Item number 5, motion Bond and Huizar relative to Department of Public Works and Department of Water and Power to prepare a study detailing feasibility of creating an underground wiring district along the Pacific Coast Highway. We have staff from the Bureau of Engineering and Department of Water and Power.
Very good. I only have one question, is what is the time frame for this project?
It would go in about 2018. We'd like to underground it by then. The line itself is a visual blight along the coast. We're restoring the area back to a natural condition, and we'd like to have it done by 2018.
Great. Colleagues?
Quick question for clarification.
Sure, Mr. O'Farrell.
What's the price per foot these days to underground, and how is undergrounding here different from, say, a boulevard anywhere in the city? It seems like it's a different situation.
That's correct. Rodolfo Monroy from Power System, LADWP Power System Undergrounding Program Manager. The cost for a single circuit in a residential neighborhood that would be not very congested at all would be about $1,000 a foot.
Still, okay, that's what it was 10, 12 years ago.
Yes, and as you have more circuits and you have more appurtenances, it does get significantly more expensive. It can go up to $2,000 to $3,000.
So that standard will be the same for this project as well.
Yeah, this is a single primary, what we call a 4,800 volt line. So it's on that order. So 2.4 million is 2,400 square feet, linear feet.
Thank you.
Very good. Hearing and seeing no comments from the committee and no speaker cards, we'll go ahead and concur with the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee action to instruct the Department of Public Works and the Department of Water and Power to prepare an underground wiring district feasibility study as specified. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6, Mr. Prieto.
Item number 6. Actually, I think, do we approve this on consent?
Oh, I'm sorry. We did take up 6 and 7. Very good. That brings us to public comment. I've got 3 cards here. Laura Muraida, Reina Hernandez, and Jorge Madrid. Mr. Madrid, go ahead.
Thank you, committee. My name is Jorge Madrid. I am a resident of Boyle Heights and also the campaign manager for the Environmental Defense Fund. I'm more excited to hear the rest of the panelists speak here. They can get into a lot more depth of the campaign that we're working on. I just wanted to report to the committee on a remarkable event that happened on the east side. We had about 300 participants come out last Saturday to an event called East Side Sol. And one thing that we know and that we'll discuss a little bit further is that there is a big gap between the progress that we're making on solar power here in Los Angeles and being able to get that solar power and that access to that clean energy economy and jobs to communities like East Los Angeles and South LA that I call home. Now, I know that there's a very important reason to do this because of equity purposes and because we think it's the right thing to do, but I also wanted to go over a couple of other benefits. For one is that there is this huge market here in the city and across the country of renters and of people who don't have the money to pay for a solar system up front or to own their solar system. And even if you do have the money, only about 22% of all the roofs in the United States are suitable for a rooftop system. Community solar helps solve that gap. And while we're doing that, we're providing, creating good jobs, visibility for the clean energy economy. We talked a little bit about covering our base load. In-basin solar power, community scale, helps to add a little bit more pressure to that hose that we were talking about earlier today and get the voltage support we need and allows customers to save on their bill. And I'm here to emphasize EDF support and also our support as a member of the Repower LA Coalition. Thank you.
Ms. Hernandez.
Mi nombre es Reina Hernandez.
Sorry, I'm going to translate for her. Hi, my name's Reina Hernandez.
Soy madre de 7 hijos. Vivo en la comunidad de Pacoima desde hace 20 años.
Hi, I'm the mother of 7 kids, and I've been living in Pacoima for almost 20 years.
He vivido la necesidad en la comunidad, ya que esta comunidad es de bajos recursos.
I live in an area with, predominantly low-income people. We need.
Por esta razón, pido a nuestros líderes comunitarios su apoyo para la campaña solar por all.
And that's why I'm here to ask all of you, council members, for your support for a community solar program.
Que consiste en instalar paneles en áreas adecuadas.
To install in areas of need.
Con programas que puedan ayudar a personas como yo que pagamos alquiler de una casa.
Yeah, programs like Community Solar would really help me as a renter, especially economically.
Esto ayudaría significativamente en lo económico, por lo que agradecería su apoyo a todos ustedes como líderes.
And that's why I'd like to offer, I'd like to thank you all for your support in advance. Thank you so much, council members.
Gracias por su atención.
Thank you for your attention and time.
Hi, my name is Laura Muraida, and I'm a researcher with SCOPE, which is a South LA-based community organization, and we're also a member of the Repower LA Coalition. And as others described, the Repower LA Coalition is a coalition of over 30 community-based organizations, environmental organizations, workforce and training entities, and IBEW Local 18. And collectively, we've advocated for a sustainable public utility, good jobs, and protection for the most vulnerable low-income residents in the city. And as a coalition, we support LADWP's incremental move away from fossil fuels and increase investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency. And we'd like to see these investments benefit all customers, including those low-income residents and ratepayers. And we also want these investments to result in the creation of good local jobs, and particularly for disadvantaged community members. So that's why we're here today to support the development of a community solar program in Los Angeles. And we believe that the development of this program will provide access to the benefits of clean, renewable energy across the city, and also create more training and employment opportunities for that lead to careers in civil service. We conducted some research on the current residential solar program, the solar incentive program, and found major disparities across LA, and we'll hand out folders with this information. But just to share, we found that customers in Watts have received approximately 37 cents per capita over the past 15 years in incentives. as compared to Bel Air, which residents have received almost $200 per capita in incentives. And like Jorge mentioned, it is because the program is cost prohibitive for many residents and for other reasons. But we've also conducted focus groups and in South LA and other areas, and we realized that there's a real desire from customers across LA to participate in a greener utility. And so we just like to advocate for an equitable community solar program that's affordable and accessible and creates savings for all ratepayers.
Great, thank you very much. Hearing and seeing no additional business before the committee, we are adjourned.